Hi everyone, JJ Lee here, and this is the Better Next Year sequel contributors meeting, the tape version. Um, what I'm doing today is I'm going to take an opportunity to walk you through some of our goals and our objectives and what we're looking for in stories. And some of these ideas are quite fundamental, not too complicated, but I thought I should mention them just to help guide, especially if you're a new writer or your style is more oriented to a lyrical or a story style that may not be character driven, which is the first thing that I should mention. So the kinds of stories that we're looking for the sequel to Better Next Year, and we're very excited about having a sequel or a follow-up volume, is we're looking for character-driven stories. By character-driven, I'll talk a little bit more about this later, but character driven means that there will probably be a change in the narrator in the story. They'll evolve their thinking. There'll be one position that they hold earlier in the story that's asserted, and when we find out by the end of the story, that position or understanding of the world has altered. The other thing we're looking for is not necessarily the classic essay or personal essay structure, but more narrative. And so by narrative elements, we're looking for a beginning, a middle, and end that's driven not necessarily by plot, but by a circumstance or a scenario or a premise that drives the action in the story. And because of the nature of this being like a seasonal content that's around the idea of solstice, winter, or Christmas itself, depending on and the holiday or one's distance from the holiday, depending on what your religion or your background is, we're looking for a focus setting um, that we're not necessarily covering all Christmases. We're looking at a particular Christmas or a particular winter holiday or a particular time or event in a specific, window of time during the year. So that's an important thing to take note of. We have enjoyed stories in the last version where the narrator is indeed the main character. So it is something you, as the writer, have experienced and gone through in this Christmas time period. So they're personal stories. Not always. It can talk about. It could be observations of another figure in your family or another person in your life and how they endure Christmas. But we are definitely looking at that focus around a main character rather than a topic or a subject or any other sort of device or structural construct to drive the story. So we're looking at characters, people, you primarily, the narrator, going through an event that is enclosed normally within the context of one particular Christmas. Though there may be other Christmases that surround it that provide the angst, the complexity, the feeling, the nuance that you're looking for. So we're not saying don't talk about any other winter holiday period in your life, but that somehow those events outside of a particular moment inform how the narrator or main character feels about that particular moment. So we know it's a constellation of Christmases that we always negotiate at that time of year, but we are focusing or creating surrounding that constellation or centering that constellation around a single event. So one particular episode. We're looking for true stories and we're looking for memoir stories, and so it's not fiction. Though, funny stories are allowed to pilot a little bit higher, if you know what I'm saying, because humor is the goal of the work. And so, with that in mind, funny is something we're definitely looking for. Originally, if you look at the slides, these are the slides I showed. If you were at the workshop, you would have seen grittier and tougher tones. That's not true anymore. Now that we've gone through the run of Better Next Year through the Christmas season last year in 2023, we've come to the conclusion that we actually had the right balance of story and tone in Better Next Year, the original first book. So it doesn't have to be grittier. If you have a gritty story, throw it in. If you have a tough story, throw it in. But definitely, we don't have to go any further than we did in terms of that kind of tone or texture in the work. And ultimately, we want the stories to have an impact on the reader. So that they're poignant, that they reach and touch other people's experiences of Christmas in a profound way. So that's the basic, call out for story. Just to be clear about the character driven concept. So this is the, us pulling it apart a bit. We definitely we want to be able to understand what the characters want at the time, what they're after, what they're pursuing, and what they do to manifest or make the thing that they want happen. So this is interesting because often when we think about our memories, we don't really have a clear idea of who we once were in the past. And so I really encourage you to sort of explore and try to understand what they wanted. Because often, if we do take the opportunity now as writers to reflect on our past selves and what they wanted, we actually have a clearer idea of what they want now, more of what they wanted at the time now. So me, if I reflect back on my past, I have a clear idea of what I wanted more so than I did at the time of the events themselves. So to apply that kind of insight and reflection into the work is welcome, because you may see more of the story now when you revisit the past than the main character did, the younger version of yourself, the earlier version of yourself perceived at the time. And I hope that makes sense. One of the ways, if you're having trouble understanding this whole character driven concept, one thing I teach in my nonfiction class, which is mostly memoir driven, is the idea of the credo. A character believes something, and that credo, so a belief as in our family didn't celebrate Christmas because it was no fun, and then they have a fun Christmas, and then the credo changes. So these kinds of simple ideas, like there's a personal belief of the character that drives the action, or you discover upon reflection there was a belief in your earlier self that determined a lot of the behavior that was demonstrated in the story, right? Or among the other characters. So somebody else's credo, might be another party in the story, that another individual in the story that has a credo that defines the action and what takes place. But that is tested in the story, and so that's by having a credo change, a change in belief in the character from the beginning, having one belief and then altering it at the end because of what happened, that equals character growth. We're also entertaining the idea of character flaw, like that the protagonist at the beginning demonstrates or plays a role in the ensuing action due to their flaw. Could be being greedy, it could be being stubborn, it could be that kind of, those types of human folly, elements of human folly that we're looking for. And if you're looking at the slide, you've probably already read ahead. So yeah, character changes thought, outlook, or circumstance. And ultimately what we're talking about is not just a funny story or a cute story or a heartwarming story, but one that's driven by insight. Hence the word epiphanies in the original title, Better Next Year, an anthology of Christmas epiphanies. It's sort of like having this crucible or this test of the season. And when it's not going perfect, we go through some sort of change or transformation or development just through the pressure of the event itself. And so being in locked into that, even if it's about like not getting a gift that you would have wanted when you were younger, that is a kind of crucible. And even the desire for the gift, because often there's that sort of sour grapes, you didn't get it, so you don't want it anymore. And then that's a strange emotional journey to go through. And so if you're sensitive to that, to take an opportunity to explore that. Now, the reason why we say this is because we'll actually all have bad Christmas stories, but it's how we look at those bad Christmas stories is the difference between a story that we can use and a story we can't use. And it's that sort of insight and reflection and being able to sort of pick apart and bring to life that past event in the way that you could do it scenographically, as if you could practically shoot it in a movie, is something that we're looking for, because we're looking for that sort of classic storytelling structure and that classic storytelling response to a problem. And I think that's fair. I think that if that's what we're doing, just to emphasize, we don't need high stakes. We don't need it to be a terribly cruel or Dickensian Christmas. It can be low stakes, like you don't want to be the person that cooks Christmas dinner. Okay. That's something I've discovered. Lots of people do not like having to cook Christmas dinner. So the stakes could be, how do you get out of cooking Christmas dinner? And then maybe Christmas dinner comes along and you realize you can't stop yourself from meddling. But what's that all about? And what is that all about is actually the point of the story. Like, not that I gave up Christmas dinner, someone else cooked it, then I meddled and there was a kerfuffle, but to really understand and pick apart what's driving the character in that moment of kind of an emotional low, or a, where it's not very gracious to give up Christmas dinner and then, not allow the person who's taken over their job to actually do the job, right? No matter good or bad how it turned out. So those are kinds of, that's what I mean by narrative elements, and how it can be low stakes. So Christmas dinner is quite a low stake. Um, it's important though. This is a tough one because sometimes the main character or the principal character of action is not the narrator, not you. You're watching someone and how they behave at Christmas. In that case, you do have to find a way to give agency to the character and for them to have action that matters to the story. That's something that we value in the thing, and that it has a to and fro. That it's not just about a problem and this is how we solved it at Christmas and everything worked out great. We're not looking for that. We're looking for a true, three act structure, possibly, that has, like, there are good moments in the story and there are bad moments. There are attempts at success and failures, and just that ebb and flow of the relationship got better, but then this happened. Like, that ebb and flow of good and bad is definitely, what I call good innings, like a baseball game, and bad innings in a baseball game. And it produces the drama of the work. So having a goal, stating a problem, whether this, even if the problem has low stakes or high stakes, it doesn't matter, and that the main character has agency in the context of this story is really important, rather than a witness or just a person commenting on stuff that's happening, would be great. Let me think. That's narrative elements. And going forward, just to be clear, we're going to look at all the previous submissions just to make sure, because it was such a rush to look at the first set, go through the first run. And so we're still going through that process of looking at the submissions that we didn't publish, because I think we left a lot on the floor that we shouldn't, that, just couldn't get in on time. And because of the limited space that the books are, they're wee books. They're not big books. And we might have to do a lot of them to get all the great. There are many great stories. Your contributions were great, and so it's just a matter of having the time to work with you to if they're missing some of the things I just mentioned, instilling them, because I think that's what we're looking for. We still don't have a submission deadline, because that's not my job. I'm here to cheer you on, help you develop your stories, and in the end, select the stories that should go into the book. But a lot of the logistics of submission is going to be on the publisher side, and that is still the case. And that decision has not been made because it's just early January. But it will. We're going to have a lot earlier submission deadline than we did last time. So. But there's more. There'll literally be more time to write the stories, though, mind you. So just bear with me on that. And the other thing that we're going to be doing is we're trying to develop a roadshow or a holiday storytelling event. I think if you're going to submit, you might want to be a person that's comfortable reading in public or actually telling the story of this event off script, without a script, in other words. So, and there's even a possibility, if you're not in the book, we still may tap you to become a storyteller for our events. So, because we're looking now, this is only a possibility, and I'm just throwing it out there, but that depends on how we produce it. We were talking about a podcast. I don't know if we're going to have time to do a podcast this year, but we're going to keep pushing forward. I hope that information tells you about the tone and texture of the work. That we're looking for great storytelling and great character development, and I really look forward to looking at your older submissions, and I also look forward, if you resubmit again, a new your newer work or your revised work. And I don't mind that you resubmit. You don't have to tell me that you're going to do it; just do it, and I'll realize that you have two different stories. Because if I'm going to look through the old ones anyways, but I'm happy when the time comes to see a newer story um, emerge if you're going to do that. Now, that's not very efficient. So you might want to wait to see if I reach out to you with feedback, but but I'll only be able to reach out to people that we're thinking of running a story with. Okay. And thank you for hanging on. It's never over. Uh, I'm an educator and a mentor for nonfiction writers, and you have to understand. I think all your stories are terrific, and we're kind of. I feel like we're kind of do this differently. I'm trying to create an anthology where people who have stories to tell, we find a way to help them tell it, and uh, in that you have an opportunity if you're less experienced as a writer or haven't yet had an opportunity to be published, to come and bring your stories to the table, and for us to have an opportunity to talk about storytelling as a group, not your story only all the time, but also to talk about storytelling and the types of techniques and styles that I employ or I've imparted or shared with other students or other mentees or other writers, and that I've learned from other writers. So I hope that you're open to the fact that, this is an ongoing conversation. It's not a, yes, I loved it, and no, I don't love it. And, it's not like that. It's just about bringing the best story forth that we can. And, every time a story, one of those stories gets into a volume of Better Next Year, it's because it had reached the point where it could. And that's not, um, this is an untimed race, right? The race isn't, there's a start and there's a finish. We both know that, but how long it takes to get there doesn't really matter. So if you're okay with a prolonged process, I'm okay with a prolonged engagement because I don't think I've sent a hard no to anyone yet. And I don't feel comfortable doing that because of the way I feel about how these stories should develop. And it's part wrapped up in my idea of mentorship and training and development and allowing people who have great stories to find a venue for them. And sometimes, maybe you don't need this kind of intervention or you need this kind of sort of meddling, which I think it is. I'm meddling. But if you're okay with that kind of meddling and you want to learn a couple of tricks that I know at least, or the other writers know, then hang on and we'll have a great time. It's both workshop and publishing opportunity. Let's put it that way. So I hope you're having a better this year now, and I look forward to your submission in the next few months.